So another good example of where it's important just to know the law, because we might come to be harder on ourselves than we really need to be. Also note that that in the B'diavad case, in the post facto case where they didn't stipulate in advance, so one of the considerations that the Ramah is using is a Hafsid Meruba, so a great loss, which is a serious halakhic consideration. So it's not as if we want Jewish business people to be like kamikazes here on Shabbos and incurring gigantic losses. So there are always solutions that we can find to mitigate losses without violating Shabbos, of course. So, but it just takes planning, advanced planning, and will, and normally you can find a solution. All right. So, okay. So another topic that comes up is a Jew may give a non-Jew money with which to do business, and then even though the non-Jew does business with it on Shabbos, may split all the proceeds with him evenly, since this work is not incumbent upon the Jew, so that we should say that the non-Jew is acting as the Jew's agent, nor is it visibly evident whose business it is. The Ramah adds that this is true only where the non-Jew alone does business with the money. If, however, each one alternately does business with the money for one day, and as a consequence, the Jew must do business with the money on the other day, equivalent to what the non-Jew does on Shabbos, it is forbidden. All right.
But are there ways around that? Like if he creates a second business that is only associated with a non-Jew, and they keep a good secret that there's actually a connection between these two companies, would that possibly be a way around that one? Since we're going by public perception?
Right, but I mean, that's not... Right, so a Jew may give a non-Jew money with which to do business, and then even though the non-Jew does business with it on Shabbos, may split all the proceeds with him evenly, since the work is not incumbent upon the Jew, so that we should say that the non-Jew is acting as the Jew's agent, nor is it visibly evident whose business it is. So that's the first case.
Well, let's say that everybody knows that they do business together, they're partners, but then let's say the Jewish person, being rather clever, like opens up a second company, and nobody knows that the company is only associated with the non-Jew's name, and he does that for this purpose, so that, like, if the other guy is going to do the same business, it won't be associated with the Jew because it's a second company with a separate name, and where he does a good job to cover up the true identity of things. Would that be an example of halakhically acceptable fancy footwork?
So that we should say that the non-Jew is acting as the Jew's, and so we wouldn't say that
Right.
in that case that the non-Jew is acting as the Jew's agent, nor is it visibly evident
Correct.
whose business
He would
it is.
go to do what I just said for that purpose. So then that would be okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so likewise, a Jew is permitted to give a non-Jew merchandise to sell if he fixes wages for him, where he works by the job, but not where he is a day worker. Okay, provided he does not tell him to sell on Shabbos. So we've had this type of job contracting arrangement before. Last week we had this. So if a Jew accepts an oven from a non-Jew as collateral for a loan, and the non-Jew obligates himself to give the Jew the profits of the oven as fixed interest for his money, it is permitted for the Jew to accept the proceeds of the non-Jew's baking on Shabbos, since the oven belongs to the non-Jew, while the Jew owns no part of it. Moreover, the Jew does not tell him to work on Shabbos. The non-Jew therefore labors on his own behalf to fulfill the condition to which he agreed. Okay. However, if non-Jews bake in a Jew's oven on Shabbos against his will and give him bread in payment for the use of the oven, it is forbidden to derive any benefit from it.
If the Jew's oven is used. Is that what you just said?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Mishnah Berurah adds C. Bach, who writes that this refers to where they baked it on Shabbos alone. Thus, even though they baked in it against his will, if he will accept the bread, he will be receiving Shabbos profits. If, however, they baked in it on other days as well, it is permissible to receive the Shabbos profits from them as well, as part of an overall payment. See the Biur Halacha to the effect that this would be permitted even if the baking was not done against his will. For even though he committed a transgression by permitting them to do so, nevertheless, post facto, b'diavad, the earnings of the oven need not be forbidden, since the prohibition here of a non-Jew using his oven on Shabbos is only for reasons of maras hayin, so of the appearance of impropriety. All right. So, chapter 246, laws of lending and renting to a non-Jew on Shabbos. Okay, and the Mechaber comes out and he says, it is permitted to lend or rent one's articles to a non-Jew, even if he performs work with them on Shabbos, since Jews are not commanded to have their articles rest on Shabbos. Right, so this is actually it's a discussion in the Gemara with Beis Shammai. Yeah, I think arguing that we are obliged to have our kelim rest on Shabbos too. Right?
He lost that argument, didn't he?
He lost that argument. We'll read something of that right now, but 1 second. Some authorities say that work tools such as a plow and the like are forbidden to be rented to a non-Jew on Erev Shabbos. However, on Thursday it is permitted to rent these out. In any event, one must not receive payment for Shabbos except that which is included as part of an overall payment. For example, one should rent it out for a month or a week. Lending him something is permitted even on Erev Shabbos. The Ramah adds that the prevailing ruling follows the latter view. It is permitted too to lend an article to the non-Jew on Erev Shabbos, even if it is stipulated that the non-Jew lend him something in return. This is even for work tools. Other articles may be lent even on Shabbos if the limitations above do not apply. In such a case, we do not deem this to constitute a form of rental. All right. So let's hear what the Mishnah Berurah has to say about this. So we said it is permitted to lend or rent one's articles to a non-Jew, even if he performs work with them on Shabbos, since Jews are not commanded to have their articles rest on Shabbos. The Mishnah Berurah says this is the opinion of the Rif and the Rambam. They hold that the law taught in a brisa, one should not rent out one's implements to a non-Jew on Erev Shabbos, but on Wednesday and Thursday it is permitted, is due to a commandment requiring that one's articles rest from work on Shabbos. This means that the brisa follows the view of the school of Shammai, who hold that one is obliged to have his objects rest on Shabbos, just as he is obliged to have his animals rest. The school of Hillel, however, hold that a person is not obliged to have his articles rest. From this, it follows that it is permitted to lend and rent out one's articles even on Erev Shabbos, even such implements as are used for work.
So Shammai loses this argument?
He loses this argument, yes.
Why did he think he had a chance to win it? Like, I understand we need to rest and observe Shabbos. What is my hammer and saw that, like, a non-Jew could use for whatever he wants to do? Why does that have to rest on Shabbos? That's It's not like a human being that's being called upon for a commandment.
Okay, but let's say you are using your vessel to soak flax,
Okay.
and say if you say
Lend it to a non-Jew.
you're potentially no, but let's say that you just have the flax soaking on Shabbos, you're benefiting from that happening on Shabbos.
But why would it be wrong for you to? I see. I'm combining the examples we're giving, but to give it to a non-Jew who might then go and do that. Maybe you rent it out to him by the week, and now he does that on Shabbos. He soaks the flax seeds on Shabbos.
Right. Okay. Well, that seems to be what the halacha is saying. So, with a proviso that this is done on Thursday.
But whatever his name was, did he think that the possessions of a man should follow the laws he follows? Was that the logic he was using, that the tools and the objects that are his possession are an extension of him and therefore should come under the same guidelines? I'm just trying to understand the logic of his argument.
Okay, but the logic of the argument comes into play when you think about benefit.
Right, I can see why you don't want to derive benefit. But still, an example where you're renting out to somebody, but he have objected to the renting out, and maybe I'm confusing two different examples. But wouldn't he have said, no, it's your tool and it needs to rest on Shabbos, and you can't rent it out on Wednesday for the week because then it won't be resting on Shabbos? Shlom.
Right, that would be the idea that that you're renting it out on Wednesday or Thursday, so that it's definitely not explicitly for Shabbos. Right?
Right, but then it's the tool that needs to rest, not the person on Shabbos. He's saying, like, even if you rent it to another person, the tool itself needs to rest, even if it's not in your use at that moment.
Maybe that's not what he's saying. Maybe he's saying that it's because you can't derive benefit from your possessions on Shabbos, so that they have to rest too. No,
okay.
There would be a logic to that.
There would be, but it's going to get shut down. But at least that's logical.
Right. We're not just saying that,
the tool has its own soul.
Right. Pantheistic view of the universe where everything has its soul. I mean, there is something to this in Kabbalah, but
were the souls of other entities than humans need to observe Shabbos? Or just that they have souls?
No, just that they have souls.
Okay, with different marching orders. Okay.
Right. Right. So the school of Hillel, however, hold that a person is not obliged to have his articles rest. From this, it follows that it is permitted to lend and rent out one's articles, even on Erev Shabbos, even such implements as are used for work. Even the Rif and the Rambam, however, would hold that it is only permissible to rent out all implements as part of a more inclusive rental. Not, though, for Shabbos alone, even if one rents them out at the beginning of the week, since this would constitute Schar Shabbos profits. As stated further on in this paragraph of the Shulchan Aruch, in the opinion beginning with some say, regarding which, that is, the part in that opinion dealing with Shabbos profits, we find no opinion that is lenient. Okay, the second opinion, beginning with some say, etc., is the view of Rabbeinu Yonah, which is that this brisa does not forbid renting implements because of a commandment that one's articles rest, but rather is the opinion of all schools of thought. For the reason of this prohibition in the brisa, according to this view, is that if one gives over implements of work on Erev Shabbos and the non-Jew works with them immediately thereafter on Shabbos, it appears as if he is doing work by the Jew's order. This would be forbidden, since telling a non-Jew to work constitutes a rabbinical prohibition. Even though above it is stated that it is permitted to give a non-Jew skins for tanning near dusk on Erev Shabbos, since because he has fixed his wages for the completed job, the non-Jew works on his own behalf. That case differs in that the Jew has no profit from the fact that the non-Jew does work on Shabbos. But in renting out implements, however, it is clear that if the Jew were to stipulate with the non-Jew that the latter have the implements lie idle on Shabbos, he would not pay him the same amount of rent. Consequently, since the Jew thus derives a profit from the fact that the implements are hired out to the non-Jew without any specifications that he do no work with him on Shabbos, and the latter performs work with him on Shabbos, he appears to be the Jew's agent for this. However, it is permitted where he gives it over to him on Wednesday or Thursday, for then he does not appear so obviously to be his agent.
Question. Like, since selling on Shabbos would appear to be forbidden labor, how do we measure that? For example, obviously, if the Jewish person sells, let's say, one of these skins to somebody on Shabbos, and the person, he says that's wrong because he just sold it on Shabbos, he's in trouble. But let's say he sells the thing on Wednesday, and the guy says, look, I can't come by to pick it up. The only day I can get it is Saturday. And he says, all right, it'll be on the porch. Just don't talk to me. And then the guy comes by and picks it up off the porch, which is still technically on his property.
But that's...
Is that okay?
No, because...
That's still not okay.
Right, because that's part of the Kinyan. So actually moving the merchandise is part of the acquisition.
Oh, so that was my question, okay.
So
you couldn't
we can't transact on Shabbos at all.
What if he left it off of his property and said, look, it's going to be under a cover. I hope nobody steals it. It's going to be under the tree.
All title would have to be, the Kinyan would have to be done before Shabbos. The act of acquisition would have to be done before Shabbos.
So the time he picked it, the person picked
so
it up,
he would have to go. He would have to go and take possession of it. So
before
and you
Shabbos.
do that. It's different with different articles, but yeah, you have to do a physical act to the article. Picking it up, maybe, or drawing it towards you. It depends on what this is. But yeah, you're going to have to do some physical act to show that you've acquired possession of this, and that would have to be done before Shabbos.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. It is forbidden to lend any article to a non-Jew on Shabbos or even on Erev Shabbos if it is close to dusk, when there is not sufficient time to remove it from the lender's premises before dusk. For an observer might assume that the Jew has ordered him to carry it out. That is out to the public domain. It is forbidden even in our towns where we do not have any true public domain, which includes, this refers to places which do not have 600,000 people moving through the thoroughfares. So we saw this in Erevin, that a public domain, according to some opinions, reflects the Jews moving through the desert, and so it's a place where 600,000 people are moving daily. So in effect then, using this standard, there are very few true Reshus Harabim, so public domains in the world, right? So New York might actually constitute one with the...
Brooklyn, you said tip them over the edge.
Right. So, with the traffic inflows over the George Washington Bridge, over the Queensboro Bridge. I forget which expressway in Brooklyn is a problem. So... and could really be I don't know whether it's part of the BQE, but...
in terms of too many or too few?
Too many, over 600,000. So,
I'm guessing the BQE is probably the most trafficked.
Right. And that's a consideration. So that is, according to some, is a Reshus Harabim, so a public domain on the biblical level. All right, so some want to say that if we don't have the 600,000, then We don't have a true Rishus Harabim. Instead, we have a rabbinical domain called a Carmelis. And so different rules apply to a Carmelis. All right. So accordingly, if the city is encompassed by a wall, in which case it is permitted to carry throughout the city, and the non-Jew lives there as well, it is permitted to lend him articles not used for performing labor. But it is forbidden to sell or rent him articles, even in such a case, lest it be said that he sold or rented him something on Shabbos. On the other hand, if they are implements of work, it is forbidden even to lend them to him unless he takes them out of the entrance of his house before Shabbos, so that it not be said he is doing work as the Jew's agent on Shabbos. So, in other words, they're not even going to a kinyan in transaction. They're saying that they're relying on marasayin, so on the appearance of impropriety, that it looks like the non-Jew's just acting as the Jew's agent. Okay. It is forbidden to rent or to lend one's animal to a non-Jew to do work with it on Shabbos, since a person is obliged to have his animal rest on Shabbos. The Ran holds that an animal sold on trial is considered the non-Jew's. Wait a minute. They have two sets of the same footnotes here on the same page.
It's a test.
Yeah, it is a test. Okay, so the Ran holds that an animal sold on trial is considered the non-Jew's as long as he has not expressed a desire to return it, but the Jerusalem Talmud seems to disagree. All right.
I didn't know there was another Talmud. There's a Jerusalem Talmud?
Yes, there is.
How many others are there?
No, just the Talmud, Babylonian Talmud, and the Jerusalem Talmud.
Is one more of an authority than the other?
For practical purposes, the Bavli is more authoritative. The Yerushalmi is more nowadays more scholarly, like it's more the purview of scholars.
Was it there first?
It's much more condensed.
Did either one exist before the other one?
And I mean, this comes from Eretz HaKodesh, comes from the Holy Land, so a lot of people attribute it more authority than the Bavli, but just as a matter of practical fact, the Bavli is much more studied and the source of many more laws. Okay, so I forget which Tana it was, but there was a Tana who sold his mule, I believe, to a non-Jew, and the non-Jew came back to him and was quite upset because the mule wasn't working on Shabbos. And so the Tana had to go over to him and tell him that he had sold him to the non-Jew, and it was okay, he could work on Shabbos, and after that he did that.
I wouldn't have blamed the mule if he started to walk against the wall and scrape him against the wall like the donkey in the other story.
Mm-hmm. But, yeah. All right.
But wouldn't there have been one school of thought that said, but the possessions of a Jew should, like, rest on Shabbos also? Like that, it seems to me like the mule was acting consistently with that other rabbi who felt that the possessions.
No, that's Torah. That's straight. That's a verse in the Torah. So the animals have to rest.
So the mule was just following his orders,
Right,
his
right,
divine
right.
orders.
Right. But he did, yeah. And as soon as he understood that he was sold, then he worked for the non-Jew.
I see. He's got to adjust.
Right. All right. So, next topic, chapter 247, the law concerning non-Jews who carry letters for Jews on Shabbos. So the Mechaber says, one may send a letter with a non-Jew even on Erev Shabbos close to dusk, provided the Jew specifies his wages for carrying the letter, but only if he does not instruct him to travel on Shabbos. If he does not specify the wages, then if there is no permanently established postal official, meaning an appointed person to whom all letters are sent, who delivers them to their addresses in the town, it is forbidden to send it with the non-Jew even as early as Sunday. But if there is a permanently established postal official in the town, he may send it even on Erev Shabbos, provided there is sufficient time left during the day to reach the house adjacent to the city wall. The Ramah adds, some authorities permit it even if he does not specify the wages, and even if there is no permanently established postal official in the town, as long as he sends it out on Thursday or earlier. In case of necessity, one may rely on them, on these opinions. Okay. So what does the Mishnah Berurah have to say to this? He says that the same law applies to all work. When one engages a non-Jew, if there is not sufficient time remaining to complete the work before Shabbos, it is required that one specify to the non-Jew the wages that will be due for his work. For then the non-Jew will be doing the work in his own interest and not for the Jew. The reason why this law is stated specifically for a letter is to inform us of a special prohibition applying to letter carrying, namely that it alone is forbidden, that is, even where there is sufficient time remaining before Shabbos for the letter to be delivered, where payment is not fixed, and where there is no permanently established postal office in the city, as is concluded. But the law for all other vessels, objects, or money sent from one person to another on Erev Shabbos through a non-Jew is the same as for all work which one engages a non-Jew to do. These are permitted, therefore, even where wages are not specified, as long as there is sufficient time left during the day to reach the premises of the recipient. For in the case of all other articles, we need not be concerned that the non-Jew will not find the addressee in his house and will have to search after him on Shabbos, as we do in the case of a letter, which is why it is forbidden. Because the postal agent might be searching after the guy on Shabbos, and which would be inappropriate for Shabbos, not in the spirit of Shabbos. Ufte de chol, so it would be a weekday matter, weekday business affair, and we wanted to avoid those on Shabbos.
Would that be just a letter or delivering anything? Like in today's world with Amazon and everything, you get all sorts of deliveries that could run into the same issue. I guess maybe they only had letters in those days.
Right. Well, I mean, we're used to just leaving the things up on the porch. It's not like
you have to put it in the person's hand.
Right.
In the old days, I guess that's what you did. Have mailboxes.
All right. All right, so those are some of the parameters for interacting with non-Jews on regarding work on Shabbos. that should give us a general introduction to some of the issues involved. Okay, now here's one that has come up a few times. So chapter 248, the law for a person who goes to sea in a ship or who sets out with a company of travelers on Shabbos. We're switching gears from non-Jews and now we're getting into traveling on Shabbos.
You said you had to leave by Wednesday or Thursday, I believe, or Tuesday or Wednesday, one or the other.
All right, so we'll read the introduction of the Mishnah Brura. Before proceeding to explain the Shulchan Aruch, let us cite the Bryce in the Talmud, Shabbos, Daf 19a, that deals with this matter. The rabbis have taught, one must not put out to sea in a boat less than 3 days before Shabbos. For which situation was this said? For that of a voyage pertaining to an optional matter. But it is permissible for a case involving a mitzvah. However, he must make a stipulation with the shipmaster that he stop for Shabbos, though afterwards he does not stop. These are the words of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says he need not do so, that is, make such a stipulation. However, from Tyre to Sidon, which is a one-day journey, it is permitted even on Erev Shabbos. So far the text of the Brisa. Now, many explanations are given for this by the poskim, by the halakhic decisors. Some say the reason it is forbidden to set sail is lest the Jew might himself have to perform work on Shabbos for the sake of saving a life, since the sea is a place fraught with peril. Or that the non-Jewish shipmaster will do a Shabbos labor for him by tying the sails, or will do some other desecration of Shabbos. Or it is forbidden because of the prohibition of traveling beyond the Tchum Shabbos. So the Tchum Shabbos being the Shabbos boundary beyond 2,000 cubits outside of a city, which is the limit we can walk on Shabbos. So as explained in the Beis Yosef at length. Okay, the Rif takes the position that if it were because of the possibility of having to perform work or because of Tchum Shabbos, it would be undoubtedly forbidden to set out even before 3 days. Also, it would not be permitted even for the sake of a mitzvah matter. In his view, the essence of the prohibition is due to the fact that it will lead to the omission of the commandment of Oneg Shabbos, of rendering Shabbos a delight. For people suffer for the first 3 days of traveling by boat. Due to the reeling of the boat, one's body feels broken. As it is written, they reel to and fro and stagger like a drunken man. And also because of the stench arising from the saltwater seas. A person's spirits do not return to him until after 3 days of traveling, by which time he has grown accustomed to this.
I'm not sure everyone gets there by the 4th day, but okay, go on.
All right. So, in other words, it takes 3 days to adjust, so you better leave 3 days early, or there's not going to be a chance of enjoying Shabbos at all. Okay. Some say that the reason they prohibited putting out to sea in a boat is that it resembles going floating or swimming on water on Shabbos, which according to all opinions is forbidden due to an injunction against this enacted lest one fashion a swimmer's barrel. But prior to 3 days, it is permitted, since due to the fact that he is compelled to set out a long period of time before Shabbos, he has a reminder and will not come to make a swimmer's barrel. As for those authorities mentioned above who hold that the reason is because of work that he might be forced to do, or who forbid it on account of Tchum Shabbos, according to them, the reason for the distinction made by the Brisa between within 3 days and prior to 3 days is that the 3-day period preceding Shabbos is deemed before Shabbos, so that it is incumbent upon a person to take precautions so as not to come to desecrate Shabbos. Prior to that 3-day period, however, which time is deemed the period after the preceding Shabbos, vigilance concerning the following Shabbos is not yet incumbent upon him. During these days, therefore, it is permitted to put out to sea. Even if subsequently he should be compelled to resort to desecration of Shabbos for the purpose of saving a life, this is permitted.
Doesn't saving a life is like a get out of jail free card for almost any typical sin?
Well, we're supposed to limit the malachas that we're doing, so saving a life as much as possible, but it shouldn't cause us to hesitate at all.
Is there any sin that we're not allowed to take the consideration of like this could be life or death? Is there anything we can't do based on that one?
So saving life has absolute priority over everything. So you shouldn't hesitate. You should know the laws so that you can limit the malachas that you're doing, but it shouldn't cause you to hesitate in saving the life. Okay. You do what's needed. Okay. All right. So. Right. So according to this idea, then the week is divided into two parts. We have until Tuesday, which belongs to the preceding Shabbos, and after that, then we're working towards the next Shabbos. So. So when we're working in the period of after the preceding Shabbos, then we don't have to be concerned with the following Shabbos. Right? So this also explains why we can do Havdalah until Tuesday morning. So if you forget or you can't do Havdalah, you don't have the right stuff, you can do it until Tuesday morning. All right. So now let's see how the Mechaber translates what the Mishnah Berurah said into law. One is permitted to set out to sea in a ship, even on the Erev Shabbos, provided he is going for the sake of a mitzvah. One should stipulate with the non-Jewish shipmaster that he stopped to rest on Shabbos, and if subsequently he does not stop for Shabbos, it does not matter. However, for an optional, that is, non-mitzvah purpose, one must not set out in a ship less than 3 days before Shabbos. Okay. The Ramah says that, but before 3 days it is permitted, even in a boat drawn by animals, even if the water does not reach a height of 10 tefachim from the seabed, and even where the Jew will have to work subsequently on Shabbos in conducting the boat. Okay. Even in a boat drawn by animals, the Mishnah Berurah says, that is, we do not say that it is analogous to traveling in a carriage, in which travel is forbidden on Shabbos, even if one has entered the carriage prior to 3 days. See the gloss in paragraph 2, that according to the common practice of pulling boats along a river by animals, like the Erie Canal, it is permitted to set out on such boats even within the 3 days. The phrase prior to the 3 days is meant only to apply to other types of boats, according to the Vilna Gaon. All right. So 7, even if the water does not reach a height of 10 tefachim from the seabed. A tefach is a fist. And even if the water does not reach a height of 10 tefachim, in which case it might have been supposed that it would be forbidden because of Tchum Shabbos. The point of this statement is then that this is not so and it is permitted, the reason being that he set out prior to 3 days, as below.
There's nothing wrong with spending Shabbos on a boat, though, is there? What if it's a houseboat moored to the side?
All right, well, that's a good question, and it's not a simple thing. So,
You've probably come across that one many times in your own travails.
right. I mean, in the end, yes, it is permitted.
If you do it the right way.
Right. All right, but yeah, we'll come to that. All right. And even where the Jew will have to do work subsequently on Shabbos, the reason is, as we have written above, that the 3 days prior to Shabbos pertain to the following Shabbos, and as a result of this, it becomes incumbent upon him to be careful not to come to a desecration of Shabbos. If he sets sail during this period, he is in effect making a stipulation to have the Shabbos violated for him. The days prior to this, however, belong to the past Shabbos. In this case, since he has put out to sea under permitted conditions, he need not desist on account of the following Shabbos. For then, if a peril befalls him, and he must desecrate Shabbos for the sake of saving a life, this will not constitute a desecration, since it is permitted to violate Shabbos for saving a life. Okay. So if it is a short distance, such as from Tyre to Sidon, which have only a day's traveling distance between them, it is permitted to set out to sea on Erev Shabbos in the morning, since it is possible to arrive there before Shabbos. Similarly, it is permitted to set out on Thursday, where there are 2 days traveling distance. Where there is a custom not to travel on Erev Shabbos at all, even for a short distance, one must not do so. Okay. Now, the reason why one should not set out by ship less than 3 days before Shabbos is the mitzvah of Oneg Shabbos, the enjoyment of Shabbos. For on all of the first 3 days of traveling on water, people suffer and are upset. This refers only to those who set sail on bodies of salt water. As for rivers, however, those who sail on them experience no discomfort. Consequently, it is permitted to sail on them even on Erev Shabbos, provided we are not certain that they do not have the depth of 10 tefachim. For since Tichum Shabbos is a rabbinical prohibition, for even with regard to 12 mil, for the regard to the 12 mil Tichum, approximately 11.75 kilometers in some view, or 14.4 in others, traveling more than this distance is in many opinions a Torah prohibition. Okay, so for even with regard to the 12 mil Tchum, the halakhic ruling is that according to all opinions, there is no Torah prohibition on seas and rivers, since they are not similar to the camps in the wilderness. That is the Midbar, where the Jews traveled for 40 years after leaving Egypt. Only settlements similar to the camps of that period are considered settlements for the purposes of applying the laws of Tchum Shabbos. Therefore, in a case of doubt, we adopt the lenient position. So where rabbinical prohibitions are involved, a doubt is treated leniently. That is, we assume that there is a depth of 10 tefachim from the bottom of the boat to the top of the water, and we apply the rule there is no Tchum Shabbos above 10 tefachim.
That's very shallow water.
That is based on Erevin 43a. Right. So, right. So we have a principle in Erevin called Gid Asik that a boundary extends up infinitely, but that does not apply to the Tchum Shabbos, we're saying. So if then we're 10 tefachim above, in airspace 10 tefachim above the Tchum Shabbos, then the Tchum doesn't apply anymore.
And why is it different on Shabbos?
Why is it different on Shabbos? What do you mean?
Didn't you just say that the normal parameters change on Shabbos and
No,
it doesn't go infinitely upward anymore?
Right. No, I said that it just doesn't apply to the Tchum Shabbos.
Oh, okay.
No. It doesn't apply to the Shabbos boundary. So if the boat is 10 tefachim from the bottom of the water, from the bottom of the sea, from the seabed, then there is no Tchum Shabbos above 10 tefachim. And so we're not overstepping our boundaries, in other words.
I know this is a silly question. I just can't stop myself, and maybe it touches on an important principle. But when Jonah was swallowed up by whatever he was swallowed up by, and he's somehow way over 10 tefachim water deep, and to all the complexities of the story that, like, he let himself be tossed over, jumped over because he felt he was responsible. Whatever the story is, do these, and maybe it's absurd that I'm asking this, but did the Shabbos laws get suspended because he was swallowed by the fish and it's out of his control? Or would this be an inadvertent, like, violation? Because, like, while he's in the it's living for at least 3 days or more, however long it is inside that fish, he may be violating some of these things we're talking about. Like, do you just say, oh, it doesn't matter, it's beyond his control? Is anything beyond our control? Like, is that at least an inadvertent violation?
What's he violating?
Well, the only thing I can think of at the moment is if he transfers from the boat to the fish, he's beginning another journey with the fish. Like, not exactly that he intended it, but that's what's happening. He's starting a new journey. And let's say it's Thursday or Friday. You're not supposed to start a new journey after the middle of the week.
But like we learned in Erevin the other day, say we're not basing our halachas on emergency situations.
Right, so that's why this would get suspended, because it was a matter of life or death. So he's just trying to live.
So in these cases, then Shabbos prohibitions are going to be relaxed.
Except he did get himself into he's responsible for being in this life and death position. Mm-hmm. But okay, you say it's suspended, we'll give the guy, he's got enough service.
Right, he does.
Okay.
All right. Okay, but where we know that from the bottom of the boat to the bottom of the river there are less than 10 tefachim, it is forbidden to travel beyond the Tchum limits because of the prohibition of Tchum Shabbos. The Ramah adds that similarly in the case of a ship where the Jew would have to do work on Shabbos, it is forbidden to embark during the 3 days prior to Shabbos, even in a case involving flowing rivers and the boat is more than 10 tefachim above the riverbed. There is, however, no prohibition involved where animals pull the boat at the edge of the river. This is not analogous to traveling in a wagon, which is prohibited.
So what can you do if the mules are pulling the boats through the Erie or the Morris Canal?
Right, so that's not a problem.
So that's not like taking a trip, and it doesn't matter what day you start.
It's not like riding in a wagon.
Is it like riding in a boat across the ocean?
Yes, I mean, we're not. This is not analogous to traveling in a wagon, which is prohibited. In a wagon, we might come to tear off a branch from a tree.
That's true. But could we leave on a Thursday or a Friday to take the barge pulled by mules down the Morris Canal? Or not? Are we controlled by the law that says, no, you can't leave after Wednesday? You may have a little bit more of an ability to stop and observe Shabbos properly.
So because this is a river, and there's no discomfort, so people are going to be able to enjoy Shabbos, and it would be okay.
So river is different than ocean, and canal
river
goes
is
with
different
river.
than an ocean.
Okay, that's an important part.
Right. Okay, so the Ramah says, similarly, in the case of a ship, whoa. I just lost everybody. How did that happen? Because it wasn't charging. Okay, similarly, in the case of a ship where the Jew would have to do work on Shabbos, it is forbidden to embark during the 3 days prior to Shabbos, even in a case involving flowing rivers and the boat is more than 10 tefachim above the riverbed. There is, however, no prohibition involved where animals pull the boat at the edge of the river. This is not analogous to traveling in a wagon, which is prohibited. Okay, so where the Jew would have to do work, it is forbidden to embark during the 3 days prior to Shabbos, even on a river. Okay, so let's leave it there.